Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I go over the week's events in the world of Scientology as covered on Tony's Substack, addressed right there on the screen. Hey, Tony, welcome back.
Chris, it's great to be here. Got some workmen doing a little repair work upstairs, so hopefully it doesn't filter down through the mic here, but
Yeah, we should be
we're
good.
hoping for the best
Awesome.
here.
Well, what a week. And this is the first week where we are posting on Saturday as a sort of, okay, here's the last, sort of 5 days or last week or so of stuff. So that's what we're doing today. So welcome to our new time slot, everyone, here Saturday at noon. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. First story to talk about is a Chris Owen sort of retrospective, sort of breakdown of the publication of Inside Scientology and Scientology's attempts back in the 70s. And man, their attempts were not mild to stop this book. Please tell us the details.
Yeah, he had reminded me that Monday was the 70th anniversary of the first publishing of Lolita by a very colorful publisher by the name of Maurice Gerodius. And I had written about this guy myself in my book about Paulette Cooper. I wrote about Robert Kaufman and some of his travails getting his book published, and I did write about Len Zimberg breaking into Kaufman's apartment. But wow, Chris went over it with all kinds of new detail I hadn't heard before, and I just thought this was a great story. But right around the time Paulette Cooper was investigating Scientology for the first time, and she had written about it for a magazine, and then she was looking to get into a book. She got to know this guy Robert Kaufman. Kaufman was a Manhattan pianist who had decided to get into Scientology, and he really got into it very heavily. And in those days, Chris, if you wanted the advanced stuff, their advanced org was in Edinburgh, Scotland. That's I know that's not the case today, but back then, if you wanted to go beyond clear to the OT levels, you had to go to Edinburgh. And he went over there, and it just broke him. He one of the things he talked about was having these 15 and 16-year-olds screaming at you and telling you what to do. And he had a total nervous breakdown. He came back to New York. He hospitalized himself, and it helped him get away from Scientology. So by the time he got to know Paulette, he had met her through some. There were some other ex-Scientologists on the Upper West Side that Paulette had gotten to know while she was doing her research. And he let her know. He said, "Listen, I'm writing what I went through in Edinburgh. I'm trying to find a publisher." So she got her book out, Scandal of Scientology, in 1971. Meanwhile, he had found this Maurice Gerodius, and as Chris Owen explained, Gerodius had inherited basically this publishing company from his dad, but he had turned it into something really unique. He published Lolita, he published the very first publishing of Naked Lunch from Burroughs, and then he published stuff that was just straight out sort of the porn of the day, and in the 50s and 60s, early 60s, of course, it was really scandalous to have stuff like that published, and it would get banned and censored, but he knew that that was good business, right? So there were a lot of profiles of this Maurice Gerodius. Who's this guy? He's like sort of like a Hefner kind of his day.
Wow.
But he ran into problems, and so he was in New York. He was trying to regroup. His company in Paris had fallen apart, and he saw in Kaufman's book, hey, maybe this is what's going to help me revive my fortunes. And I think, Kaufman's book, Gerodius did publish Robert Kaufman's book, Inside Scientology, 1972. And people forget about it because almost nobody saw the original copies. I think you can get a PDF these days or whatever, but very few people saw the book. But it is the first time the name Xenu appeared in print.
Yep.
Robert, see, people think I used to wonder whether it was between the Tampa Bay Times or the Clearwater Sun or the LA Times in the 80s. No, it was Robert Kaufman in 1972 laid bare OT3. but nobody saw it, right? It was just so few copies. But they, Scientology went after him hard, just like they were going after Paulette at the time. Chris has all these great details about the way they were sneaking in and stealing copies of the book and threatening Kaufman and then just did what they could to drive Gerodius's business into the ground, and they were successful. So Chris has got all the details. It's really fascinating. One thing that in particular that Chris mentioned that I definitely want to highlight was and I've talked about this in my book, at some point after the kind of failure of the first publishing of Inside Scientology, Robert Kaufman came to Paulette and said, you know what Gerodius wants to do? He wants to publish some overseas foreign language editions. And so one person that had surprised them, that had showed up on the scene when they saw that he saw this book being published, was L. Ron Hubbard Jr., Nibs. Nibs had suddenly showed up out of nowhere and wanted to help them. And so Gerodius had this plan, and Paulette told me all about it. She worked, remember, Paulette's a professional magazine writer, has a couple of books under her belt. They put her together with Nibs, who couldn't write, to put together like a 30-page introduction to this next edition of Kaufman's book. So in the summer of 1972, that's what Paulette was doing. Nibs went over to Paulette's parents' house, Mamaroneck, and they were working on this thing. And then eventually he went to her apartment and helped her finish it up there. It never saw the light of day because there were no additional editions of Kaufman's book. But what blew my mind was a few years ago, I realized that manuscript still existed, that Paulette authenticated it for me, and that had never been published. So I published it with Paulette's blessing at the underground bunker about 6 years ago. And if you have not seen it, you should see it, because I think what makes this the best testimony from Nibs is that he had a real professional writer and fact checker helping him out.
Yeah.
And so I think this book is as factual as we're going to get from Nibs, because later on, that's 72, later on in the later in 70s and then the early 80s, Nibs was saying some really wild stuff about his dad. And I think it's hard to credit it,
Yeah.
So I think if you want to know what Nibs went through with his dad and early Scientology, read this piece. It's called it's got a bizarre title, A Look Inside Scientology, or 0.1% of Scientology. That's the crazy title of it. And I published it at the bunker several years ago. So anyway, Chris mentioned that in this piece. But, so two things. If you want to know about the early history of Scientology, two things you got to read. Chris Owen's piece this week on Scientology trying to destroy Robert Kaufman and Maurice Gerodius, and go back and look at what Nibs wrote with Paulette. It's super harsh about his dad, his memories of his dad. So real good stuff in the history of Scientology this week.
Awesome. And if anyone has ever had, and I know that folks watching this show don't, but if anyone has ever had any idea, that Scientology's criminal past, right? If you don't know about this, or you don't know like how hardcore Scientology can be when they feel they have unlimited power, which is how they felt in the 70s. They just didn't hold back. And we're talking full on criminal activity, breaking and entering, ruining people's lives with malice aforethought, as though they're on a religious crusade. And they wanted to destroy Paulette Cooper. They wanted to destroy this publishing guy whose name I have a hard time saying, so I won't say it.
Rodius.
Yeah. And Kaufman. I mean, they went after Kaufman hard. And this was after, mind you, and John Atack has talked about this, how there are mental health facilities around in England that regularly have folks coming in who were doing the OT levels, who just go absolutely wonk, right? And that's a technical term, going wonk. And And yet Kaufman is an example of that. He must
Yeah.
have been like, what the hell just happened to me? And he writes this book. And of course, what does Scientology do? They spend years trying to destroy this man and anything he touches, all because he's going to reveal their secrets, which are absolutely batshit insane, drug fueled nonsense, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the whole thing smacks of such ridiculous censorship and the authoritarian 1984 attitude that really sits at the heart of Scientology. And I wanted to emphasize that angle of this because it's brutal. And anybody who reads this and thinks Scientology has turned over a new leaf or is a bunch of good guys now, you know, oh, that's why I like so much putting a microscope on Paulette Cooper and Kaufman and this time period, because this is, what Scientology really wants to be able to do to anyone, anytime, anywhere. But they've had to make it so covert now, and cutouts and hiring private investigators and stuff. It's quite a
And,
window into the true
yeah.
nature of this stuff.
Right.
Um, gotta these people. Okay, now coming all the way to present now, we have new reporting out of the Wall Street Journal. This
Yeah.
blew me away. Headline news: Scientology featured in this article about some fraud or something. What was this about?
Yeah. I think this is the first investigative story about Scientology in the Wall Street Journal since December 1997, when
Damn.
when they revealed the secret agreement between Scientology and the IRS. I may
Right.
be wrong about that. I asked that at the site the other day, and nobody could think of anything another example. Very rare for the Wall
Yeah.
Street Journal to investigate Scientology and put it on the front page. It's a very fun story. It's not so much about the Church of Scientology, it's about a Scientologist in Chicago who has this startup where he's trying to create a small stock exchange that caters specifically to black businesses. But what his investors apparently have no idea is it's basically a wise operation, right? It's a business owned and run by a Scientologist that uses Scientology policies and technology to operate
Right.
and forces it on its employees. And I think that was probably the thing that was the most alarming, was that these investors, this guy's asking people to invest a lot of money in this business, are not being told anything about the Scientology connection. And this is a guy, I was really happy to see that the journal linked actually to the bunker, because we had reported that this guy's a gold meritorious donor to the IAS. And so I was able to put up the photo of him with his trophy. So what that means is this Joe Cicala has given at least $1 million personally to the IAS. So that's, and his son, it turns out, is the ED Day of the new Chicago Ideal Org. So this is a family that is about as involved in Scientology as you can possibly get,
Yeah.
and they're white, and they want to create a stock exchange that caters to black businesses. I mean, come on, this just looks like a classic grift now. And the Wall Street Journal put it on the front page. I think they did a great job.
Awesome. And let's highlight that in addition to there being, maybe an undisclosed issue with the fact that Scientology is so integral to the operation. And if it's a wise business, that's what that means, because there's a whole consultation side to this where they infuse Scientology into how the business is run. It's communication systems, it's production monitoring, it's human resources. All of that is run by Scientology policies as though it's a Church of Scientology. It's same stuff. So there's a failure to disclose there, but there's another deeper aspect of this which you mentioned, which is that they force their employees to partake in Scientology courses and services at the local org, or they
Which
set
they
up a
deny. We have to point that out. They deny it. But see, they instead of Sakala himself taking questions, they had an attorney basically denying everything.
right.
So who knows? I mean,
Well, I mean, this is the standard wise operation would look like,
yeah,
XYZ. And
yeah,
I have been dealing with, over the last few years, it probably once a year for me, just little old me, has somebody contact me about having Scientology forced on them at their workplace by a Scientology boss.
yeah.
Right, so that's why I say this with such confidence, is this is what they do, is
That's what they do.
they force their employees to go do this, and they rely on the fact of ignorance that their employees don't know that it's illegal to
Yeah.
force religion on you, and that it actually is something you can go to the EEOC and file a lawsuit. I mean, this is like a big deal to have religion forced on you, and they pretend Wise is secular and has and is separate from Scientology, so they can get away with it, right? But it's not. It's the word for word the same stuff.
And I'm sure, I think their attorney was making denials that, the company itself was not donating to Scientology, and if Joe Sakala wants to donate privately to his church, but
Sure, sure.
I raised the example of Richie Akunto, right? I don't think there's any question that Richie
Yeah,
was so desperate to get those trophies and reach those next levels of millions of donations that it hurt the business. He was taking money out of the business and was part of the reason why that insurance empire collapsed.
right.
So, hey, Joe Sakal is free to do that all he wants. But the question is, shouldn't the investors have some knowledge of that so that
That's
they have
right.
a choice? Do you really want to get into an enterprise with a Scientologist that's turning over every extra dollar he's got to David Miscavige? So
That's
I
right.
think that was the biggest service that the Wall Street Journal did, was to make those investors aware of what they were getting into. And so that's going to be really, I've been looking for some sort of response from Dream Exchange, it's called, and I haven't seen anything yet. I haven't checked in the last day, but I'm interested to see how they deal with this. But really good piece, very very fun to see the word Scientology on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Big time. I was so pumped seeing that. And so, yeah, I really want people to understand how deep this stuff goes. Um, Now, there was an article about the Freewinds and these new FSM awards. Quite a few. What was this all about?
Well, I always care about what Scientology is doing right now, right this minute. So
Yep.
when readers forward to me flyers and stuff, I think it's a valuable thing to post to get a sense. This really did got a huge reaction. I wasn't sure if people would think it was old hat, but no, people really were reacting to it because what they're doing, a FSM, field staff member, right? People that make some money, you bring in new people to Scientology and they spend money, you get a cut of it. And so some people can make a decent living that way as long as they bring in enough people. Well, this was specifically for the Freewinds. And just real quick, for those who aren't aware, Scientology launched the Freewinds back in 1988 as a way for there to be this culminating experience when you get to the end of what they call the bridge to total freedom. The final step is called OT8. They wanted there to be a very special setting for that. So that was the purpose in purchasing a cruise ship and sailing it in the Caribbean for the last 37 years, was that's you have to go to the boat to get OT8. But there aren't enough wealthy Scientologists going to the boat for OT8 to pay for that expensive ship. It's incredibly expensive to keep that ship running. So, especially in the last 20 years, I've seen them go to so many other things. They try to entice people to come with these conventions, artist conventions, public relations conventions, leadership courses, and all this stuff to get, because there just aren't enough people going there for OT8. This particular promotion was for FSMs to recruit people to the ship. And if you could find 5 people who went to the ship and paid for a convention, then you got a free convention. But
That's
not for the
right.
but course materials not included. And I so there were if you got people there for conventions, if you got people there for OT, if you got people there for other things, then you would get yourself some free coursework. And I think I guess what I was asking people was, does this is this as desperate as it sounds? And I think most of the ex Scientologists in the audience were saying, "Wow, this is really desperate. They must not be getting people coming to the boat because they're asking a lot and they're giving very little." And I don't know, Chris, what was your impression?
No, very much that. I mean, 5 people, 5 signups, and you get the free thing, or 10 signups and you get the free thing. You get to do the free service. This also includes their boot camp, their sort of executive training, command training thing that they do, which is basically just giving the public the EPF. And I mean, it's really quite stupid. And this is the outfit that does Teen Week and stuff. I mean, they are desperate to get people on board there. I'm going to actually throw something out, which is whatever, but controversial. But I don't know that L. Ron Hubbard would have approved of any of these awards, because this is what are called training awards, and also they're giving away free accommodations too. They're like, hey, and you get a free room. Come to the ship if you can get this stuff. I don't recall any Hubbard policy about giving away free services. And in fact, I recall a policy that specifically states you better not ever give away free services. And that's actually what these training awards represent, is free services. Hubbard said you give a commission, right? It's 10% or 15% money paid when the person signs up for a service. They go write the check. Here's your 10% or 15% or whatever, so provided the guy starts right then. I don't know that they still even do that, or if they've cut it down to 5%. I don't even know what the service commissions are, but I do know that there are very, very few professional FSMs anymore. And this is a job when you were somebody who didn't work for the church, but you did all day work for the church. You were like a remote salesperson for Scientology all day, every day. That's what an FSM really is.
Okay.
And there were people driving Ferraris around in pack because they were making so much money in the early 90s from doing this as a full-time job. They would carry around a 3-ring binder of business cards of all their people that they would follow up on and make sure they were all doing services. And they were making real money. Miscavige started cutting all that stuff off at the knees in the mid 90s. We're paying too much out to these people. It was so Hubbardarian. This is my money. You don't get any of it, right? And so the FSM system kind of collapsed a bit in the 90s in Scientology.
Okay.
So when we say smacks of desperation, I'm like, yeah, they've taken this training awards thing and they have run with it. And I remember when they first started doing this stuff back in the 90s, trying to solve the filing system. They were trying to get people in to do the filing to make PAC ideal. And they were
Central
doing
file.
training awards. And then the people who put that together ended up getting justice because it was off policy. So
Ah,
that's what made me think, hey, I wonder if they
I
were just
see.
circling back around, right? A lot of Scientology minutia there, but I just thought I'd comment on some of that stuff, because this is, if you're wondering, do they still incentivize people in Scientology to promote Scientology? Yeah, but look at what you got to do, right? You got to get 10 people to go to the boat. How easy is that? That's about 6 months of work.
Yeah,
That's
it's
what
a
that
lot of
is,
work.
you
Yeah.
know? So they're not doing good at all, is what I see out of that story for sure. Um, okay, this was a little fun. This follow up on Trish Duggan and that museum
Oh
of
yeah.
hers.
Yeah. Yeah. All I knew was that September 18th was supposed to be the day when the recommended finalists from the library committee presented their projects to the city of Clearwater. Clearwater has this wonderful library building that they're not really using very much. They're going to be they're building a new city hall. So somebody, I think it was Lena Teixeira, one of the city council members, had this great idea. Let's put a world class museum in there. She was thinking of the Dali Museum, Dali, Salvador Dali,
Hmm.
but that they weren't interested or something. So they put out a call for proposals and got some people proposed. And I found out that I was contacted by this guy that owns this Wizard of Oz museum in Cape Canaveral that gets very good reviews. And he was mystified that the library committee had chosen Trish Duggan, putting in just a secondary branch of her St. Petersburg glass museum in there. And and so I wrote that up, and by the time we finished it, he had slipped from second place to third place. He was so disgusted. He said, "I'm not going to that September 18th thing." So that's what I had in the back of my mind was, okay, the top two though are going to present to the city council, and we'll see, Trish Duggan get her glory, and she's going to have this other, you know. But when I checked the September 18th Thursday night to city council agenda, it wasn't on there. Well, I went back and realized that on Monday's work session, this had come up, and all five council members had admitted that they were not happy with the finalists at all.
Wow.
And that, especially, well, the final two. And Bruce Rector, Mayor Rector, said specifically when we were starting this whole process, what I didn't want was just another branch of something you can already get in Tampa Bay. He said, "Listen, He said, "The Imagine Museum is terrific, but there's already an Imagine Museum in St. Petersburg. Why would we have another branch here?" That's not what he wanted. And so they all said that they weren't happy with the finalists, and so they are going to open it up again January 1st. And Lena really wants them to go a full like 9 months so they can get the really big operations to propose. So I mean, the upshot is no, Trish Duggan is not getting her glass art in the Clearwater Library, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Scientology, Clearwater's got enough Scientology. They don't need Scientology's biggest donor getting her glass art in the library there. But Mark Bunker points out that, maybe the reason you're not getting world class proposals is that people don't want to come to Clearwater. It's too creepy. This is the Scientology's the ever present problem. But we'll see. Maybe the city council can get something better this time around. Mark, of course, proposes they should put a Scientology Invasion of Clearwater Museum in the library.
Project Normandy Museum.
And he's got great suggestions for it. Oh, you got to read it. Come to the Substack and read them. It's hilarious. Well, Mark is so hilarious. But yeah, so I mean, I look, I felt for Fred Trust and the Wizard of Oz Museum. I like him. I'm not sure that that's the best fit for the Clearwater Library. But I was just stunned that they were even thinking for a minute of putting Trish Duggan in there. That would have been a mistake. But the city council members, all five of them, were in agreement that this just was not what they had in mind, and they're going to go for another round. So we'll see what they come up with next year. Good for
That's
them.
awesome, and it's fun to see, that they're not so, suborned by Scientology, that it's like, oh, oh, Trish Duggan, stars in their eyes. I was very pleased by that. It's nice to see the Clearwater City Council just doing, city council business without, the Scientology crap. Guess we'll see what happens now.
Yeah.
It's a good point they're making, by the way. It's actually very forward thinking. I'm really like, yeah, that's impressive. Like, no, we don't want what's right down the road. We need something that's a draw for Clearwater.
Right.
That's what we need. We need something unique here,
Well, and Mayor Rector was saying we need something that's unique to Tampa Bay and maybe to the whole country.
Yeah,
Let's
exactly.
take your time and get it right. So we'll
That's
see.
right. I guess they won't. I guess they wouldn't be too enthralled by a cult city museum.
I think Mark was onto something there, but no, that's just it's not going to fly. I don't think.
Probably not. Probably not. City council's not going to appreciate that one. No, we are not cult city. Okay, now speaking of Cult City, holy cow, this one, I saved this to last because it's just so over the top. Um, People have asked about this over the years. They wonder about this, right? Do Scientologists really think they can take it with them? Well, Tom Cummins, Scientology whale, has some ideas. What this was Looney Tunes. Please,
Yeah, Tom's an
please.
interesting guy. He's been coming on in recent years. He would be the biggest donor in Scientology, except that Trish Duggan is so much far ahead of everybody. But he's in a solid second place. Our most recent tally was that he's given at least $130 million to the Church of Scientology. That's 60 million to the IAS and another 70 million to Ideal Org projects, and it's probably considerably more. Um, but he's not only handing Miscavige these huge amounts of money, he's also, I gotta say, one of the most eager, energetic donors that we've ever seen. He shows up for everything. They have him doing seminars and all over the place.
Yeah.
So I've been writing about him for some time. My readers know him. One of my readers noticed that a few years ago, Cummins had hooked up with this attorney who specializes in this kind of thing, and they had put together a promotion, basically, a sort of well, it was a slideshow, but a promotion for how should attorneys trying to deal with estate planning for Scientologists, what were the things they have to keep in mind? And at first it starts out really dull. I didn't excerpt the stuff that was really dull, but then it starts to get more and more interesting because yeah, Chris, look, Tom Cummins knows he's OT8, but this body is going to give out at some point. And Tom, as a Thetan, will then go look for another body. Now, the reason why you go through so much pain and expense to get to OT8 is that OT8s are operating thetans, and the sort of incentive there is that Hubbard said that unlike everybody else, when you leave this body and you spend some time between lives, you will be able to resist the invader forces that erase our memories between lives. See,
Right.
this is one of the things that makes it so hard for us, Hubbard said, was that when you died a million, 10,000 years ago, these invader forces zap your memory. You get born in a new baby. You don't know who you are. It's only through Hubbard's counseling, auditing, that you're able to finally figure out who you were 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, a billion years ago. Once you can see your whole track of existence as a Thetan, then you can regain your godlike abilities. This is the I know not a lot of Scientologists have a hard time explaining this. They think it's about TRs and so no, this is the end goal. Once you become OT8 and this body dies, you can resist those invaders so that when you jump into a new baby, you will remember who you are. Just think of the advantage you would have when you're a 2-year-old, but you really have all your memories and you know who you are. Huge advantage, right? So that's what Tom, that's the whole point of being OT8. He can just begin a new life, remember who he is, but what about all of his cash? This is the big problem for a guy like Tom is he's got millions, but the old saying, you can't take it with you, right? So what this what this PowerPoint lays out is how to create these LLCs with particular trustees that would recognize you when you come back in a new body. I mean, Chris, it's just incredible to see it all explained in kind of a legalistic way and to see an attorney taking it seriously. It was amazing, wasn't it?
Oh my God. And in legalese, there it is, right? We're coming back and considerations about your heirs. And do your heirs really deserve your money? Or should they be, set up in some incentivized trust so they got to earn in order to get, right? This kind of
You
thing.
got to make sure your rotten kids are sticking with Scientology and that they're not getting psych drugs, right?
That's
And
right.
that's specifically laid out in these plans. So so that you, while you're trying to find that new body and grow up in it, you know that your money's not being messed with. And then what I thought was interesting was, okay, so a 20-year-old shows up and said, I was Tom Cummins in a previous life. Where's my millions?
Yep.
Who's gonna authenticate that? Well, this sort of this sort of like doesn't try to answer that. It just says whatever the church protocol is, right? And I get asked that question every once in a while. You must get asked that question. What is the church? I mean, don't you think this is all nonsense? The church is never really verified. What is the church protocol for somebody showing up and saying, "I was so and so in a previous life. I want my stuff"?
Well, I'll tell you, there actually is, and it involves scouring through the records to find the person's PC folders, their written files of confessions from their past life based on the name that's given and the dates or geographical regions. I was a past life clear in Scientology. I gave a name for my past life and generally where it might have happened. And of course, what do you think happened when that search was done to find those folders under that name? Absolutely nothing happened because there were no folders because nobody could find that name, right? And so nothing happened. And guess what's happened every single time? And I think there were about 5 times altogether in all the years I was in Scientology where I was on the lines where I would be doing this kind of work. It wasn't something I observed from the side. People would come in, past life memories, here's my name, here's where I was. And we would go do the search, right? Send the telexes out all over the world. We're looking for Joe Blow's folders. Do you have anything from this time period, this guy's name? Never
Yeah,
once did we
yeah,
find an accurate connection there. But what I just said, that's the protocol.
yeah. Okay.
So, yeah,
Well, I kind of had a feeling that it's basically never happened, but Tom's got
not
to
once.
hope. Tom's got to hope, right? He's got to put this together that he hopes that, once he grows up in a new body and shows up and says, "I'm Tom, I swear I'm Tom," that there's got to be something in that will give him his money.
He'd probably set up some kind of, safe deposit box password kind of thing or something. And good luck remembering that, right? These guys can't even get their past life name right, much less, the passwords. I've
Oh,
seen so much nonsense over the years about this exact thing and people trying to work through how they would do it. And I just laugh every single time because if there would even be one time when someone could pull it off and have an accurate recall to that detail, we have proof of past lives. I mean, we'd have it. We'd have something in that direction of that, right? And that would be worldwide news.
yeah.
But of course, we're not going to have anything like that. So it really does. Here's the last thing I'll say about this, just because it's so dumbfounding. Tom Cummins is not a stupid person.
No.
He's not a low IQ guy. He's not someone who can't think his way out of a wet paper bag. He is a multi-million-dollar businessman who has built a business empire that truly generates a ton of money. And he gives a bunch of it to Scientology, but he's living the high life and he's a really high level, high functioning, successful individual. And look at what he actually believes. It's it's like wow. So I just gotta
That's a good point. You got a good point there.
yeah, some of these one percenters are just as loony, if not loonier, than
Yeah.
your average Joe. It's sad. Um, okay, Tony, thank you very much for sharing all of this with me and all the details and everything this week. Um, do we have any ideas of what's coming up as we roll
Wow, I've
into?
got some real serious court stuff coming up. I've been we'll see if that I think this next week we're going to get to it, but it's hard to predict.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's see what happens, folks. There is right there on the screen, right there, the address to Tony's Substack again. Make sure you go to it, get your subscriptions, get your daily notifications, and then check back in with us on Saturdays now for the rundown summary from the week. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Bye bye.